Hi, for our final project, we'll be talking about nonverbal communication with haptics and proxemics. We'll be talking about the definitions and how it correlates with our hobbies. So first, the definition of nonverbal communication is something that is not said but definitely shown. And then we have haptics, which is when you are being touched, when like physical touch, and then proxemics, which is communication through physical distance, like time apart. And then for mine, Alexis, I showed my nonverbal communication through my art because my art is very expressive and I feel like it has like a depth of showing how the person is feeling or how the person, and showing how they want to express themselves by their posture. And lastly, mine shows haptics and proxemics by people looking at my art from a distance and touching my art.
Hey, I'm going to be talking about proxemics and haptics as they are observed in a public gym environment. Now, as we know, there are nonverbal rules and expectations across all public spaces, across all cultures, across various circumstances, everything of the sort. But in my time using a public gym, I've noticed that the nonverbal rules in that environment are very strict, but largely unspoken despite being so concrete. And they mainly have to do with maintaining a certain amount of space between yourself and others, so that would be proxemics, and making sure that you're not touching anybody without their absolute approval, and that has to do with haptics. There's also a fair amount of oculesic awareness, or eye communication awareness. Don't stare, don't hold eye contact for too long. But that's a topic for another day. So let's get into it. How someone navigates personal space and touch with others is indicative of their personality, their cultural upbringing, and their relationship with said others. Now, people at the gym they're on a mission, they're focused, but simultaneously very aware that they are in view of many people. And relationship-wise, people at the gym are generally strangers. Some people come with their friends or their family, but if you are not in someone's friend or family group at the gym, you're a stranger to them. And in our Western culture, it's unacceptable to be in a stranger's personal or intimate space, and I'll define those two terms in a second. Now, our Western standards of personal space and touch are intensified in this environment because gym-goers feel more vulnerable. They may not be as vulnerable because everyone there is in the same boat, but at least in my experience, you feel more vulnerable, so nonverbal expectations around proxemics and haptics are intensified. Now, the expectation is to respect public distance over 12 feet and social distance, which is 4 to 12 feet. And I pulled that from an article from Psychology Today. Now, these are the least intimate spacings that allow individuals to see and hear each other better, but still prevent them from being able to touch, which is a big no-no. No touching. Some of the more specific rules that I've noticed are that you should not choose the treadmill or the stationary bike, the elliptical, the rower, that is directly behind or next to somebody else on a similar machine, unless you absolutely have to, which, depending on the size of your gym, is pretty rare. Now, you should also not choose the bench directly next to someone in the free weights section unless you absolutely have to. This is less rare. I go to a small Planet Fitness, so the benches are usually stacked, but that's besides the point. Now, this one is a big one, as I mentioned earlier. Keep your hands to yourself, even when trying to get somebody's attention. Let's say you want to know if somebody is using the leg press, or how many sets they're going to have. Personally, I don't tap on their shoulder, I don't touch them, I just stand nearby and wait until they notice me, and I think that makes them feel more comfortable, and they don't feel as rushed or invaded and whatnot. Also, don't try to spot somebody without their request or their permission. I find it's more common for somebody to request a spotter than to expect somebody to ask to be their spotter. Or they bring a friend and their friend is their spotter. So unless somebody asks, don't grab the bar, or you'll see them dying under the bar, and that's when you know that you should just go ahead and pull it off. Now lastly, we need to understand that the gym is a place where people practice territoriality, or the tendency to claim physical spaces as our own and to define certain locations as areas we don't want others to invade without permission. And I pulled this quote from our course's textbook. So, yes, this is true. It's okay to be territorial at the gym. If you can choose your own little corner or your bench, and that's your space, but only for a certain amount of time. I've learned that it's important to not hog spaces or equipment. We need to be efficient with our time when using something out of respect for others who are there to, have some fun and make the most out of their visit, just like everyone else. And
my name is Julie, and I am doing my nonverbal communication final on my hobby, which is watching movies. So when watching movies, haptics are used to express emotions and feelings through physical touch. When watching horror movies, you can hug someone to express the feelings of being scared. And in romantic movies, you can hold hands with someone or hug them to express your love and affection. And then watching suspense movies, if you grab someone's arm, it can signal that you want to feel reassured, and it could also express that you're feeling uncertain. And then for watching tragedies, you can hug someone to comfort and express your sadness. For comedies, slapping a knee or back of the person next to you can help you express joy. And for proxemics, seating arrangements communicate the intimacy of a relationship. So depending on how close you are to that person, it can show what kind of relationship you have with them. It could be a friend, a family member, or even a stranger. So when sitting next to a friend, often you're probably in their personal space. What I have in parentheses is also a possibility for signifying that the person in your nonverbal space is your friend. So I put it could also include intimate space and social space. The reason being is typically with friends, you're like lean on their shoulder or like you're pretty close, you hold hands, with social space, you can also be a distant friend, I guess. You could like be farther away from them than best friends. So for family members, usually you are in their personal space. And this could also include intimate space and social space for the same reason I put as friends. Or love interest, you are usually in their intimate space. People, your boyfriend, girlfriend, you're usually like holding hands, you're pretty close together. It can also include your personal and social space. And then for strangers, most of the time you are in their public space. You're not really close to strangers, so when you're in movie theaters, you probably would not sit next to them. You would avoid sitting the seat right next to them because there's just like a social norm where like you just don't sit next to people you don't know. And then for acquaintances, it would probably be the social space. And this can also include public space and personal space. And then I included a picture of a diagram of the spaces that we have with each other in the top right corner.
So the hobby that I chose to do is roller skating. I love doing it on the weekends, and I do it enough to know that one of the main forms of communication is nonverbal communication between the people that you're skating with and even strangers that you don't know. So haptics and proxemics are very prominent within roller skating, which is the use of touch, like how long you're touching someone, or if you're overusing it, or if you're not using it as much as you should be to maintain a proper relationship with your peers. Proxemics is that physical distance, and that's whether maintaining that proper distance or too much distance to the point where you're acting like strangers when you aren't. There are 4 types of distance that we had researched, which is public, social, personal, and intimate being the closest, which is about a foot, if not a little bit more apart or less. And public distance being the most, which is about 12 or more feet, which is probably, it's very far in the scheme of skating. But most nonverbal communication is done in the intimate space, because if you were to go over and see your friend, you'd go over and put a hand on their shoulder or poke their side or something, which is nonverbal communication, which shows and communicates to that other person that you are there and you're with them. A lot of the times, nonverbal communication goes a little bit too far where it's uncomfortable because some people will skate over to you and they'll grab your waist or move you aside in a flirtatious tone, which most of the times people don't like. So it's good to maintain proper percentage of touch and in haptics and the proper proxemics as well. So maintaining a proper distance from people so that they can skate, but also showing to them that you are there and present with them. So about 20% should be touched by strangers, which is a hand on the shoulder or possibly moving someone aside if you're going too fast. And that is how proxemics and haptics are seen in roller skating.
In my 2 slides, I mentioned how nonverbal communication can be shown in a work environment. I have been working in a food industry for over 5 years, so I would know all about nonverbal communication in a work environment. I used to work at a restaurant where I had an aunt that would have a very ugly face, and she would make faces, and it would make the customer feel very uncomfortable, not welcomed to their restaurant. Also, your appearance, hand gestures, presentation of food, and facial expressions is very important when working in a work environment because it does show how your work environment is even without saying anything. It can mean a lot just by looking at someone dirty or showing food that looks disgusting or even handing someone a drink rude. That can lead to a lot of consequences based on the business because you can get bad reviews and this could lead up to you getting fired. So nonverbal communication does have a lot of meaning in work environment. In conclusion, nonverbal communication does play a big role in the environment, including an art show, the movie theater, roller skating, a gym, and also the work environment. All of the slides relate to hand gestures, the way you may touch someone, explaining your expression towards something. Based on the slides, all of them do connect together and all of them do provide the same information just in different environments.